All right, so thanks for the introduction. I'm very happy to be here. As he said, my name's Stef, and I'll be presenting a short overview of our results of the study titled Threat Modeling State of Practice in Dutch Organizations. So first, I have one background slide because I'm pretty sure you've all heard of threat modeling somewhere. But what is threat modeling? According to the Threat Modeling Manifesto, threat modeling is analyzing representations of a system to highlight concerns about security and privacy characteristics. And in general, this comprises answering 4 key questions. So first, what are we working on? Which mainly comprises creating a model or a representation of the system. And then second, what can go wrong? Which is actually identifying threats. Third, what are we going to do about it? So adding mitigations to the design. And then finally, reevaluating. So did we do a good enough job? So the goal of our study was to investigate how organizations apply threat modeling in practice. And this was, in fact, a collaboration with the Dutch National Cybersecurity Center. So they are the sponsor of this study. Concretely, we performed semi-structured interviews with 13 practitioners from 7 large organizations, I'm talking thousands of employees, in critical sectors, so energy, finance, and so on. And one thing to note about these practitioners is that they were at once, or are at the time of the interviews, directly involved with threat modeling activities, which is, of course, a threat to validity. But from informal contacts with other organizations, we at least suspect that these findings are generalizable to some degree. But if you have any other experiences with threat modeling at other types of organizations, maybe, I'd be very happy to hear about them. So please come and see me after the talk. So we had 4 research questions. First, how is threat modeling embedded in the organizations? Second, which organizational roles are involved with threat modeling activities? Third, how is threat modeling actually performed within these organizations? And then finally, we asked about experiences, positive and negative ones, and challenges which the organizations faced concerning threat modeling activities. So I'll go over the main findings for each of the research questions, the first 3 research questions in this talk, and I'll be sprinkling in some challenges and experiences along the way. So how is threat modeling embedded in the organization? In other words, why do organizations actually threat model? And in literature, threat modeling is marketed as a good activity to actually analyze the security of a system and to try to analyze potential security and privacy vulnerabilities. So unsurprisingly, this is also one of the main reasons why organizations employ threat modeling. But a second and even more important benefit of using threat modeling, or reason to actually do threat modeling, according to the participants, was to raise the overall security awareness of development teams. So it's actually employed as a sort of security training activity, because it's a very practical way for developers to discuss security in a context that's very familiar to them. It's their own application. So given these benefits, we also wondered how the development teams themselves are motivated to do threat modeling. And in here, we saw an overwhelming consensus not to mandate threat modeling activities, even though there's a lot of potential benefits associated to them. And instead, the organizations we interviewed focused very much on fostering internal motivation of developers, to make it that the developers themselves see the benefits of threat modeling and really want to do threat modeling themselves, which was mentioned to lead to better results than mandating threat modeling, because in such cases, the developers just want to check the box and be compliant and move on. One exception is critical applications, so with very high business value, or if there's very personal sensitive data involved. In those cases, sometimes threat models are required through organizational policies. So who's involved with threat modeling activities? The main workflow is as follows. In most of the organizations we interviewed, there's a dedicated security team. And they are in charge of actually marketing security threat modeling throughout the organization through, for example, workshops. And during the threat modeling activities, the actual stakeholders are the developers, a product owner, an architect, and then a facilitator from the security team who brings some necessary security expertise and kind of guides the threat modeling sessions. Other roles are usually not involved, and that's not because their inputs are not considered to be valuable, on the contrary, but it's usually because they simply don't have the time to attend threat modeling sessions. specifically for management roles, business management roles, they're not always aware of threat modeling and what benefits it can bring to an organization. And one of the main reasons mentioned by participants in our study is that it's almost always very difficult to actually quantify the effectiveness of threat modeling. It's very difficult to go back to your management and say, oh, we did threat modeling, and here is the benefits, here is our return on investments. And I guess it's a more general issue as well, measuring security. And that's also why most of the participants mentioned some difficulties in getting support, getting time and resources to actually organize threat modeling activities within the organizations. So how is threat modeling actually performed in the organizations then? And first I want to talk a bit about planning, because that's also an important part of threat modeling. And the threat modeling manifesto, which I quoted in the beginning, says or advocates to do threat modeling as a sort of continuous effort, because of course software systems and applications, they evolve and new threats may be introduced along the way. So the threat model itself should also be evolved over time. And in general, the participants agreed with this. They also stated that threat modeling should be a periodic activity, and also the threat models should be started early on in the development lifecycle. But in general, this was mentioned to be very, very challenging, the planning of threat modeling activities, for multiple reasons. So first off, finding the right time to start threat modeling in your development lifecycle was mentioned to be very difficult. Because if you start too early in the development lifecycle, then the scope of the application or the system may not be entirely clear, which may lead to very unfocused discussions and lengthy threat modeling sessions. But on the other hand, if you start too late in the development lifecycle to start with threat modeling activities, then some decisions can be set in stone, which may make it difficult to actually tackle security threats which you found by changing the design, for example. And of course, there's more general issues concerning planning as well, simply because first, the security team itself only has a limited amount of resources, and in these large organizations, this made it impossible to sufficiently support all threat modeling activities going on in these organizations. And then finally, because there's a lot of different stakeholders involved with threat modeling, it's just difficult to find a hole in everyone's schedule and get everyone together in a room. So during actual threat modeling sessions, the first step to answer the first question, what are we working on, is to create a model of the system being analyzed. And these models, they ranged from ad hoc drawings, freehand drawings on a whiteboard diagram, to very structured notations like data flow diagrams, and in some cases even UML diagrams. And these models were usually created based on existing architectural documentation. But as you're all probably aware, such documentation is usually not available, and if it is, it's most of the time not up to date. And that's why the participants in our study also mentioned that creating the model is a very tedious and time-consuming activity. On the other hand, we also noticed that the participants said that the threat modeling was a nice opportunity to actually revise this architectural documentation, because they're going to create a model either way. And it's also a nice opportunity to just create mutual understanding about the system as a whole. As for answering the second key question, what can go wrong? This is actually identifying the threats. Most of the organizations employed some form of stride, but depending on the context and depending on the preferences of the developers, other methodologies like pasta or bow tie methodologies were also used. And in here, the organizations really prefer to apply these methodologies in a flexible manner, in a pragmatic manner, and not to stick to strictly to a specific methodology, because as the quote here captures nicely, they really don't care usually if the quality of the threat model is high. They just care about getting everyone together and talking about security for their own application and to learn from it together. Finally, for output and follow-up, usually after a threat modeling session, a report is created, which includes, among others, the system model, identified threats, and some form of mitigation advice. But in here, the organizations also prefer to limit the reporting over it, because creating a very detailed report and writing everything out takes a lot of effort, and there's limited returns to doing that. Because in general, following up, except for fixing critical issues, is lacking, and it depends on the priorities of the development team or of the product owner, for example. So in conclusion, our main findings were that the main benefits or the main goals as to why organizations apply threat modeling are first to uncover threats, but second and most important in most organizations, just to raise the awareness of security among development teams. And they faced many challenges, including preparation, planning, scaling up threat modeling activities, following up on threat modeling results. But overall, the main factors for successful instantiations of threat modeling activities seems to stem from fostering intrinsic motivation, so to make development teams themselves want to do threat modeling, and to apply threat modeling methodologies and modeling efforts in a pragmatic fashion, not being too strict about the methodologies and the workflow. As for future work, we're looking into extending this study to other contexts like other types of organizations and other sectors, for example. And also, we're investigating the actual effectiveness of threat modeling. And with that, thanks for your attention, and I'd be happy to take any questions.